Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Hello everybody, and welcome along to today's video where I'm going to be looking back at the Series 10 finale, the absolutely phenomenal episode, The Doctor Falls. So, The Doctor Falls, what an episode it was. It was an absolutely fantastic send-off for the Series 10, Capaldi's penultimate episode, Moffat's final finale, and he's probably topped them all with it. You can see from the title that I've suggested it might have been Moffat's best finale, and certainly I think the only one that really competes with it would be the Series 5 finale. It trumps pretty much everything else we've seen since then, as far as I'm concerned. It's just, both parts have been really good, whereas it's always usually the second part of a finale to let it down. Whereas this one, it just worked all the way through. Even if it did have some of the tendencies of Hellbent again, where it very much went on in a completely different direction to what we were expecting, with all the stuff in this episode surrounding this solar farm and this sort of countryside sort of setting, was very much veering off away from the previous episode, which was all this dark, mysterious, creepy hospital and this on a completely different floor of the ship. So it kind of went in a completely different direction. Suddenly the Cybermen turned from being the sort of body horror kind of alien things being created to just the generic robot race to attack the Doctor and co. Which was slightly disappointing. Once again, the Cybermen were being a bit underused and a bit wasted as they became just another generic tin robot race put in there to be the sort of attacker of the story, but just generic robots really. So there wasn't much to them, which has been a problem with them probably throughout New Who. It just they haven't really been written very well again. I think that's probably one of the disappointments of this episode, is that the Cybermen didn't really do anything yet again. But that's only one of very, very few negative points. Other than that, this episode was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, Peter Capaldi, I can't sort of tell you how brilliant I think his performance was. It was up there with Heaven Sent as his best performance as the Doctor. Just throughout, it was absolutely phenomenal how he sort of portrayed the gradual kind of deteriorating of his body as the character throughout that episode, from when he first gets zapped by that Cyberman through till his seeming regeneration at the end. And just some of his speeches and stuff through it. Certainly that one to Missy and the Master about where he stands was just such a brilliant sort of message, that he does everything he does, not because he's got a good chance of winning, not because he has to, not because he really wants to, but because it's right, because it's kind. I thought that was a really poignant scene and really kind of sums up his Doctor, having go all the way back to the beginning of Series 8, where he was a bit dark and mysterious and didn't really know who he was or what he was or where he was really going, what he was doing, and now he's reached this point where he understands sort of that he just does whatever he can because it's the right thing to do, because it's kind. And I think that's such a brilliant kind of development of Capaldi's Doctor throughout the 3 series that we've seen. He really has come a very, very long way from that sort of fairly serious, brash, hard to get on with Doctor that we saw early on in Series 8. And Capaldi's been so brilliant in portraying that change as well. As his hair's grown longer, he's grown softer, it feels like. Throughout these 3 series, he's changed so much of the Doctor, but Capaldi's always been so brilliant in the role. And well, the other major talking point must have been Missy and the Master in this episode. John Sim and Michelle Gomez playing with each other. We thought it would be brilliant, and it really, really was. So every single scene they had, they played so brilliantly off each other, just randomly dancing together, all the sort of different kind of, almost the John Sim Master trying to turn Missy away from turning good, and just the way he kind of did that was just so brilliantly played between the two of them. Then all the stuff about his TARDIS and bringing that dematerialisation circuit and everything into it. It was, they just played off each other brilliantly. And of course we ended up with them killing each other, essentially. I mean, it would be the Master who kills himself. Or Missy who kills the John Sim Master, and then he retaliates by killing Missy as well. And so that's what's caused John Sim's regeneration, is himself. He's caused his own regeneration by killing himself, which I thought was a nice way of doing things. And it's also really kind of heartbreaking moment from the Doctor's point of view that Missy finally turned good. She did kind of agree that there's no point in doing all these bad, evil things anymore, that she should turn good, but the Doctor's never going to know that because she's never quite made it back to speak to him. And I imagine when we come around to the next incarnation, she'll have turned more bad again in like 2 or 3 years' time when they come back, and it'll all be kind of back to normal. So this is the closest we might ever get to having a proper Master turning good. And so that was really sort of hard on the Doctor, that after all this effort he put in the whole series to try and get her to turn good, all he'll remember is her sort of saying no and leaving him just there after that magnificent speech from him. She didn't seem to listen either and just kind of said, no, I'm turning bad. And then we find out she's turned good. And the other major element of this story was the portrayal of Bill as the Cyberman in this story. I thought it was really, really brilliantly done early on in those scenes in that barn as sort of Bill realises who she really is. I think it was very, very well directed and very well cut, with the shots of sort of Bill and the Cyberman at the beginning of us seeing a cloth hand, then the sort of handles on the handlebar head as a sort of reflection or a shadow in the wall. I thought that was also brilliantly crafted. Although it was a bit obvious to us exactly what was happening anyway, I thought it was still so brilliantly done for Bill realising who she is, what she really is. I thought it was just an interesting concept that hasn't really been quite realised before, that Bill still thinks she's human who she really is because she's got a very strong mind against it. But in reality, everybody else sees her as a Cyberman. And just through the episode, there's that gradual sort of acceptance and depression that she's always going to be scared. People are always going to be scared of her and hating her for what she looks like. And essentially, she says, "I don't want to live like this. I prefer to die than be stuck as a Cyberman." And I thought that linked quite well into Capaldi's sort of ending thing. If I can't be, I don't want to change. He sort of doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to survive if he has to be someone else. Which I think is a kind of a parallel with Bill, who she doesn't want to survive unless she can be herself. And that's kind of a parallel with the same thing of the 12th Doctor, which I thought was just quite a nice link and a parallel between the two of them through the episode. Plot-wise, I'll be honest, there isn't a huge amount going on here. It's very much just the Cybermen have sort of turned against Missy and the Master and co, and have now decided they're going to attack a little bunch of humans on floor 507, and the Doctor's got to try and fight them off. It's pretty much all there is to it in this plot. So it's all, as a lot of Moffat finales have been, it's all about the big moments, the sort of big character moments, the big scenes. You've got the scene early on between the Doctor, the Master and Missy as the Doctor's strapped down in the seat, and we sort of have a lot of sparring between the three of them there. Then the next scene with Bill and Bill realising she's a Cyberman. Then following that, you've got the Doctor's speech and all these. You've just got lots of big moments in the story rather than maybe a more interesting and intricate plot. It's just all about those big character moments, which is a style of storytelling that I quite like. I mean, it is very much more character-driven than sort of plot-driven, I think, a story like this. Although a lot of Moffat's era has been more plot-driven, I think a lot of his finales have focused so much on the characters and been, to some degree, more sort of talky episodes. And this was a little bit of a change of that, as there was a lot of big action scenes with exploding Cybermen and all this kind of thing, maybe a bit more than we've seen in past Moffat finales. And so we head towards the sort of ending and the resolution of this story. Obviously there was that absolutely brilliant scene of the Doctor with his sonic screwdriver blowing up all these different Cybermen, referencing all the different past Cybermen from the 60s and the 70s, even from comic books and that kind of thing, to make them all canon, as he's just shooting his sonic screwdriver and blowing them all up. It's, I think, one of the most iconic sort of 12th Doctor scenes of him running through that field of that sort of forest and blowing up this Cyberman, that Cyberman, all these different types of ones, with that fantastic sort of variation of breaking the wall as well as the music in the background of a sort of crowning moment of the Doctor when he's got no hope. He's still trying to fight off these hundreds of Cybermen as best he can, but he gets caught and hit by that Spandatian Cyberman. And essentially that's where it all goes wrong for the 12th Doctor, and it becomes rather pretty depressing and miserable as he decides he doesn't want to change at that point, so he's going to blow up this whole forest of Cybermen. And the next shot we cut to is just of this, of Bill, Cyber Bill, sat over the Doctor's dead body in this completely dull, miserable, rainy, sort of quarry-like setting, was sort of the most kind of depressing and miserable ending to a story you could have, or what it seemed to be at that point. But then we have the return of Heather. She turns back up again, rather unexpectedly, it has to be said, but if you look back through this episode, there are a few references about tears and this kind of thing. And when they show the flashback, it does all make sense. It really does make sense. It is a fairly well constructed idea. Obviously, we wouldn't have been able to work out at the beginning of the series that that's what would happen. But I thought that was really cleverly done, that she was able to be brought back by the tear that Heather left for Bill in that first episode. That's the tear we see running down her face in the Cyberman, because that tear's still there because it's not her own tear. That's why she's able to sort of cry those tears, and that's how Heather can track her down and save Bill from becoming a Cyberman and save the Doctor as well. I thought that was just so brilliantly sort of rounded off and neatened off, and kind of really linked back to the very beginning of the series and sort of, rounded off the series as a whole. We also at the same time get some nice closure for Matt Lucas's character Nardole. In this episode, he kind of reaches, I guess, the end of the line of working with the Doctor. He hasn't really got any more purpose or function, because a lot of it was about defending the Vault and all that kind of thing. And that's ended, that's all over now, so it's time for him to kind of move on and go and help, become a kind of a better person, I think, for it. He's having been with the Doctor, he's now going to go and help and support a group of sort of young people and children up in a higher floor and protect them for the future. And we end with those wonderful final scenes at the end of the episode in the TARDIS, with Bill and Heather, with Bill saying goodbye to the Doctor and joining with Heather to head off into the stars to have new adventures as their sort of atomised form, so they can fly around the whole universe wherever they like and do whatever they want. I thought it was just a very nice uplifting end to Doctor Who. I know some people have been a little bit critical about it because obviously they didn't follow through on Bill becoming a Cyberman. Essentially she's become a similar sort of immortal character as what we saw with Clara in the previous series. And so there has been the accusations of Stephen Moffat isn't able to actually kill a companion, because he hasn't actually killed a companion in Doctor Who since he started in 7 years. So I can sort of see that criticism, but I always think of that Doctor Who is at its heart an uplifting, a positive show about hope and looking forward and positivity. And so I think ending on such a depressing sort of story with Bill just becoming a Cyberman and then maybe blowing up and dying, and then the Doctor on his deathbed regenerating, would have just been such a sort of depressing and miserable end. So I think it was really nice to have that uplifting side, and it all linked, it made sense with the start of the series and sort of Bill and Heather's relationship. The only sort of little thing maybe I do have with this ending scene was very much how Bill kind of just said goodbye and left the Doctor. She didn't really almost have a second thought about it. She went over, kind of said goodbye, where there's tears there's hope, and then boom, she's off. It felt like after all they've been through over 12 episodes, she would kind of maybe have stayed around a little bit more to try and get, because she's just basically assumed the Doctor's dead and that's it sort of thing. So I just kind of, yeah, felt a little bit abrupt that she suddenly would just kind of desert the Doctor when he's on his deathbed and seemingly dead. It just didn't quite sit right with me, but I can kind of see why they did it. And the glorious final referencing scenes full of, obviously, the shot of all the different companions referencing the 4th Doctor's regeneration, I Don't Want to Go from the 10th Doctor, When the Doctor Was Me from the 11th Doctor. It was just, Where There's Tears There's Hope from the 3rd Doctor. So many different references to so many different regenerations. It was so brilliantly done, I thought, to just kind of, with Capaldi's Doctor being such a sort of classic era-esque Doctor, I thought it was so brilliantly done to reference all those different Doctors. That kind of high angle shot of the Doctor just lies spread out across the floor of the TARDIS, referencing back to the 1st Doctor's regeneration. There were so many different ones that they've drawn from in the Doctor's almost regeneration scene. But the Doctor doesn't want to go yet. He's going to fight it off. This is what Christmas is all going to be all about. He doesn't want to change again. He's changed 13 times in the past, give or take, and he just doesn't want to do it again. He wants to stay as the 12th Doctor or die, essentially. He doesn't want to regenerate, which I think is, I quite like as an idea. I mean, it was a little bit out of the blue from what we'd seen in sort of previous episodes, that he suddenly kind of become so determined to not want to change again. But I think it's just about all the trauma and the sort of hardship of having to regenerate. Remember the 10th Doctor saying it feels like death for him, and the 11th Doctor also feeling quite a lot of pain going through that regeneration. I think the 12th Doctor just doesn't want to experience that again. He just would prefer to just die than regenerate again, I think. So that's a slightly different sort of twist to it, I think. Obviously, naturally, at the end of the Christmas special, something will happen, he'll realise, why am I doing this, and then he'll go and regenerate. But I think it's a nice idea to bring with at the moment, and just kind of teases us as fans that he's almost regenerating, but he's fighting it off, he's trying to stay as the 12th Doctor. If only he could stay for another series. And well, that final moment, that final scene, as he steps back out of the TARDIS one last time, he continues and starts off that regeneration that we saw at the beginning of episode 11. Obviously, he stops that, he forces himself to stop that. Then out of the mist on this snowy setting, a mysterious but familiar figure appears. It is, of course, the 1st Doctor. He's back for the Christmas special. And yes, to be honest, yes, I knew that was coming. Well, I knew that he's coming back at Christmas. I didn't know 100% that he'd be appearing in this episode, but as soon as the Doctor kind of landed on this snowy setting, it kind of seemed fairly likely that that was what was about to appear. And obviously, up walks David Bradley as the 1st Doctor, quoting another 1st Doctor's line from the 5 Doctors, the original, I'm the Doctor, the original, you might say. That's, of course, a reference back to there. And it was such a sort of surreal but brilliant moment to see the 1st Doctor back. It was not really something we could ever quite have imagined, to see the 1st Doctor reappearing. I know it's not William Hartnell, but he does look a lot like him, and I think it is a very good likeness, and voice sort of acting as well. So I think that was just such a brilliant, surreal moment to end the episode on. Such a glorious cliffhanger, but why does it have to be 6 months to see how this plays out? And that's where it's left, on that cliffhanger of the 12th Doctor meeting the 1st Doctor all over again. We're going to get a multi-Doctor story at Christmas. It seems that this, from the 1st Doctor's point of view, is set during his last story, The 10th Planet. Certainly it makes sense with the setting of it being, I think, the North Pole, I believe, is where the 10th Planet's set. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the sort of snowy end of the Earth at one point. And so I think maybe they'll link into the 1st Doctor's regeneration as well, as he does kind of seemingly rather randomly just become wearing a bit thin and then regenerate. Maybe there'll be something that happens in the Christmas special to kind of canonise more of a reason behind the first Doctor regenerating, just to complete that. And maybe they'll almost help each other out with their regenerations or something like that. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. And it's something that I'm really, really excited about, but it was just such a teasing cliffhanger. So overall, I think it was a really, really strong finale from Stephen Moffat. There's been a lot of criticism of him over the years for his finales, often not quite sort of continuing on what we'd hoped for in a first part or through a series, but I think this time he really has pulled off a very satisfying conclusion. He gave a good satisfying end to Bill, not quite the one we're expecting, but I think a very uplifting, sort of positive ending for her. Missy and the Master, their stories have both been closed on both incarnations of that, so it's all been very closed off there. There were lots of brilliant character moments throughout this story. Peter Capaldi put in an absolutely phenomenal performance, and everything is set up perfectly for a Christmas special with the Doctor fighting off his regeneration, with the first Doctor alongside him. Are we going to see a link back to them saving Gallifrey, Peter Capaldi's very first shot in Doctor Who back in the day of the Doctor? Is that all going to be linked back in? I don't know, but it's all set up perfectly. Hats off to Stephen Moffat, I must admit. And it's been nice to see such a generally positive feel about this episode, whereas in the past there's been so much criticism. I just felt generally there was so much positivity about this episode, which was really nice to see after a lot of mixed opinions on episodes over the years. But there we go, guys. That's the end of the series. That's the end of my review for this final episode of Series 10. It's been a very enjoyable series. I'll be bringing lots of more extensive reviews of the whole series, and I've got lots of videos planned to come over the next 6 months to fill the gap, but certainly in the shorter term as well. I've got quite a few videos that I'm up in mind. Lots of stuff looking back over various elements of both the Moffat era and the Capaldi era as we're coming to the very end of that. You may find my videos aren't quite as often as they have been, but I'm still going to be looking to get some consistent uploads out there for you guys. And of course I will have an episode of music for The Doctor Falls tomorrow night. But that's it, guys. Do let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode, what you thought of the series as a whole. Do just let me know any thoughts you've got on anything at all. And remember to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and I will see you again very, very soon for another video. Goodbye.